sister moon. I seldom see you, seldom hear your tune. Preoccupied with selfish misery.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and I am reporting on the 7th day of my Camino of St. Francis of Assisi. And it's been a day of cheating. Yeah, I don't know, cheating? Maybe I did the right thing, maybe I didn't. So, okay, what happened? I woke up in Chiusi, not sure how you say it, della Verna, which is, of course, the village beneath Santuario della Verna, which is where my yesterday's stage actually ended. And I guess the first cheat is technically I should have made my way back up there. Maybe asked like Fausto to give me a lift for that, but I didn't. I just thought, oh, sod it, I'll walk from here. And so I had a breakfast, and by 8:45 I was out, which was quite early. And I thought this is nice, and it's a day of downhill. And you remember that I should have been warned, because the last day I had a day of downhill, it turned out to be a bit of a disaster, and because there was a lot of uphill in that, and there was a bit of uphill in this one. I started off; it was actually largely uphill for the first 2 or 3 kilometers. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was it was bloody freezing. I mean, like, absolutely bitterly cold. And even though I was, getting some stiff exercise, walking uphill at quite a pace, I was absolutely freezing, with a jumper on as well. And it was along the road. It was quite open, but there was even snow. Bits of snow were falling, and I was just bitterly cold and miserable, and it was horrible. And so it was just a shame, because the scenery would have been quite nice if the weather had been good, but it wasn't. It was vile. And so what I did is I walked. I walked about 3 kilometers uphill, and then got to like the head of the pass, as it were. And that's also where we changed over into Arezzo province, still Tuscany, but a different province of Tuscany. And then, soon after there was like a little refuge hut by the side of the road. So I went in there, and I put a coat on. It's the first time I used a coat on the walk, and then it was downhill, and I was wearing my coat, plus there were trees, and it was a bit more sheltered, and it was better. And I just thought, okay, well, let's plod on all the way to Pieve Santo Stefano. But then, as I was walking along, and there was still a little bit of snow falling, it was still cold, a car stopped. And they said, and there was these 2 ladies in it, and they said, "Do you want a lift?" And I thought for a second, because, part of me says, well, that's cheating. But then the other part of me is, well, yeah, I do want a lift. This is miserable. And hadn't they been really kind to stop me? So I got in the car. And they could see I was a pilgrim. They were coming from Santuario della Verna also. And they said, St. Francis guided us to stop you. And so, well, maybe I did do the right thing. And their names were Mercedes and Juliana. And they were sisters. I would put them in the 50s, maybe 60s. They were sisters. And their English, Mercedes was the main one. She was the driver. Her English was quite limited, but she had some. And I said, well, I don't speak Italian, but I do speak Spanish. And she spoke some Spanish. So with this mixture of Italian, English, and Spanish, we had a really good conversation. And they were really, really nice. And so, as well as telling me that St. Francis sent them, they also told me about a Canadian pilgrim they'd met once, and he'd been walking, I think, to Rome, and yeah, that was that, and they were just really lovely, and it was this really nice act of kindness. And they dropped me off in the square, like in Pieve Santo Stefano, and yeah, it was just great. So I said goodbye to them. I went to this cafe. I mean, this cafe was great. I think it was called Euro Bar, and it was like it played all that kind of Euro music from the 80s that would be really cool in Germany, you know, like Depeche Mode and Human League and all that kind of stuff. And Spano Ballet, loved it. So I sat in there, warmed up a bit, used a free Wi-Fi, had a coffee, contacted my host because it was my only day of Airbnb. When I was looking for accommodation, I checked both Booking.com and Airbnb, and every time Booking.com had been cheaper, except this one. And Airbnb used to be a real bargain, and I don't think it is these days so much. But this one was, and the lady contacted me, and then she actually came to the cafe, and it turned out it was across the road from the apartment. So I had this lovely apartment all to myself, and I wasn't that tired. So it was great. What I did is I used my time wisely, and I washed all my clothes, or most of them. Obviously not the ones we're wearing. And I washed my clothes and put them on to dry on the radiators and stuff. And then went out. Now, Pieve Santo Stefano is not the prettiest of Italian towns, and that's because it got destroyed during the war. So there are little pockets of prettiness in the centre, but it's not gorgeous. Although you could tell it once was really nice, and it's a shame what happened during the war. But I had a little explore. So I went to the main church, which is dedicated to St. Stephen, and I checked out when there was a mass at 6 o'clock, and then I walked along. It's actually on the banks of the Tiber, which is, of course, the other great river of Italy, and at least the other great river of this pilgrimage, because it will lead me all the way to Rome. But the Tiber is not very big in Pieve Santo Stefano, and there was another church dedicated to Our Lady, which I prayed in. That had very good acoustics. And I went to the supermarket as well and bought some food. But the main attraction of Pieve Santo Stefano is that it is the city of the diary. And there is basically the Italian collection, national collection of diaries and journals is there. And there's a museum of the diaries. So I went to this museum, and the guy there, he said, well, look, we do like these tours. I can do you an English one, but I'm doing an Italian one now. Can you come back? So he told me to come back at 5. And he says about 3/4 of an hour. So I thought, that's great, I'll do that, and then I'll go to the mass. So I just went back to the apartment, did watching, ate some food from the supermarket, had a cracking meal, and you just chilled out, read. I'm reading a book at the moment about Al-Hijra. Now, Al-Hijra, this is kind of, where, like, my spiritual meditations are going at the moment. Al-Hijra is a figure, you get him in Islamic mythology. He appears in the Quran. He talks to Moses, and he basically meets Moses. He's described as a servant of God, and he goes on a journey with Moses, like a little pilgrimage. And there's 3 incidents. Right. So the first incident is they're walking together, and there's this ship, and the people who own the ship help Al-Hijra, and they give him like a free lift, and Moses, and then afterwards he damages their ship for them. And before these incidents, he said to Moses, you can only walk with me if you don't ask questions, and you keep your mouth shut. But Moses is like, why have you done that? Like, they were nice to us, and you damaged their ship. And because it's like, I thought you said you were going to keep quiet. And then the second one, they meet these kids playing, and they get this boy. There's a boy there, and Al-Qaeda kills him. And Moses is like, what have we done that for? And he's like, I thought you said you weren't going to ask questions. And then the third one is that there was these horrible, like, people who were asking for money or something, and they have a broken down wall, and Al-Qaeda rebuilds it for them for free, and Moses is a bit like confused about that. And then in the end he says, right, you're going to keep asking questions, now I'm not walking with you anymore, but I will explain why I did those 3 things. And he said, firstly, following us there's a king, and he's basically requisitioning all the boats that are seaworthy. And so if I'd have left that boat undamaged, the king would have had it off them, and so I'm actually helping them. So that boy is going to grow up, and he's going to be a real problem for his parents, and so I'm killing him. They will have another kid, and the kid will be good and honor them. And then the third one is that those horrible people who own the wall. So actually, there's a treasure beneath the wall. And so if they'd have rebuilt it, they would have found the treasure, but they haven't. So, it's a kind of punishment. And what it is it's about, there's often a deeper meaning to things than we realise. So, but the reason I'm reading about him is I met, Al-Qaeda comes to travellers, and he came to me last year in Cyprus. And ever since then, I've been trying to get my head around it. So I'm reading a book about him, and it's really interesting. And do you know what the really freaky thing is? Like, he obviously, he is a pre-Islamic figure. He basically probably comes from Sumer or Ur or something originally, and he's often identified with Elijah or St. George. But the one Christian figure that he's said to have appeared to, or widely, known to have appeared to, is St. Francis, and he appeared to St. Francis when St. Francis got his stigmata on Santuario della Verna. So there we are. Wow. Read into that what you will. So I'm reading that. But anyway, I'm going off piste here. So I went to this diary museum, and I think it's like the highlight of the trip. Like, I expect it to be a really naff museum. But the guy, Giacomo was the name of the guy. He showed me around. He had great English, and he was so passionate. And it's basically this repository of diaries and journals. And they've picked out some of them. They keep changing what they pick out. And they're glimpses into people's lives. And it's based on this concept. They got this famous writer, the rustle of other people's lives or something. And it's about the noise of the pages when you turn. And they're glimpses into these lives. And, there's one amazing diary that is a bedsheet, and this peasant woman wrote her whole entire life on this bedsheet and then gave it to them, this bedsheet. I mean, that was incredible. But my favourites, there was I'm a sucker for a love story, right? And there was two of them. One, there was I think he was a 12-year-old when he started his diaries, but he was 15 at these points. This guy called Massimo. And he fell in love with Katya, and the diary tells the story of this teenage love affair, and they were together for 4 years, but then she went off to study, and he stayed in the hometown, and they drifted apart. And that kind of first love thing always gets me. And then the second one was Emilia and Federico, and Emilia was a noblewoman, and she was married, and a guy much older than her, very unhappily married. And she fell in love with Federico, who was a soldier, and they used to have secret trysts. Her husband slept around all the time, so I think she also wanted to get her own back on him, and she would even sneak down, like when he was down like near Naples, dealing with bandits as part of his army service. Like, she would sneak down and spend like 1 or 2 weekends with him, and it was all really beautiful and romantic until the husband dies, and then Federico's like, "Oh, we can be together," and she's like, "Nah. Gonna marry someone else." She married another rich guy, and he killed himself out of misery, which wasn't the ending I saw coming, but that's reality, isn't it? So read into that what you will. But yeah, I just love this place. And apparently it's the first in the world and the only one in the world at the moment. But the Germans are doing something similar. And the guy did say that, like, any if I write a diary of my pilgrimage, to send the diary has to have an Italian connection. That's it. So you should send it in. We'll keep it in our archive. So that'll be cool. So there's that. Yeah. So that's been day 7, and day 8 is the last of the stage. It's onwards to San Sepolcro, but that's for later. For now, this is Uncle Travelling Matt. Keep travelling.
Brother sun and sister moon.